Addiction doesn't always announce itself loudly. It slips in quietly, almost unnoticed at first. It is not necessarily a needle or a glass. Sometimes it appears as endless scrolling through social media feeds. Sometimes it is the desperate need for a message notification just to feel centered. Sometimes it is one more episode turning into an entire season. It feels ordinary until suddenly it doesn't. You're no longer seeking pleasure. You're running from pain. The frightening reality, I says, that most people can't identify where that pain originates. When Swiss psychologist Carl Jung approached addiction treatment, he didn't begin with withdrawal protocols. He didn't even prioritize the addictive behavior itself. He inquired about the condition of your soul. For Jung, addiction wasn't the core issue. It represented a symptom of something deeper. We exist in a culture simultaneously starved of dopamine and obsessed with constant stimulation. Our minds continuously seek relief, but remain trapped in repetitive cycles. Dopamine, that neurochemical linked to drive and pleasure, is depleting. This happens not merely because of our actions, but because we've lost understanding of our authentic selves. Jung described this as separation from the true self, not your social identity or professional role, but your genuine essence, the most complete and integrated expression of your being, the dimension connected to meaning, purpose, and creative expression. According to Jung, addiction represents spiritual hunger. It is an urgent message from the unconscious mind, not simply requesting temporary relief, but demanding wholeness. He famously stated that all addiction is destructive, whether the substance is alcohol, morphine, or even idealism. His point was clear. The substance isn't the problem. The inner void is. This is precisely where conventional addiction treatment often misses the mark. We address the behavior while ignoring the person behind it. We apply temporary fixes while the foundation continues crumbling. Jung understood that genuine healing emerges only when we find courage to look inward toward those shadow aspects we've buried, the parts we condemn, the parts that frighten us, the parts desperately seeking acknowledgement rather than suppression. If this feels daunting, understand you're not alone in that feeling. Because here is what matters. The shadow isn't inherently negative. It is suppressed vitality. And paradoxically, that is exactly where healing resides. But here is what makes this profound. Jung didn't merely offer abstract theories. He provided a roadmap, a comprehensive psychological and spiritual framework for reintegrating what has been fragmented. Methods that illuminate why dopamine depletion occurs initially and how to construct a life that organically restores it, not through chasing temporary highs, but through alignment with authentic purpose. We'll explore these methods, both practical and spiritual, including approaches you can implement immediately. Stay through this entire discussion, because what you'll uncover isn't simply addiction treatment. It is understanding the part of yourself that has been communicating through these patterns all along. Before continuing, if you're drawn to expanding consciousness and exploring life's deeper dimensions, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom so you won't miss any part of this inward journey. If addiction is merely symptomatic rather than causal, what lies beneath? Let's examine dopamine, not as trendy terminology, but as a biological messenger. Dopamine transcends being just a pleasure chemical. It fuels every action that makes existence feel meaningful. It represents motivation, expectation, and satisfaction. The notification alert, that first taste of something sweet, the heartwarming message saying you're thought of. When dopamine runs low, life becomes colorless, uninspiring, and empty. That is when craving emerges. But dopamine depletion doesn't originate with streaming services or comfort food. It typically begins much earlier. It starts with emotional repression, with circumstances where authenticity carried consequences, where perhaps you needed to be the compliant child or the resilient one or the problem solver. You learned to suppress your needs for survival, and through that suppression, you disconnected from your authentic self. Jung termed this psychic fragmentation. It occurs when you bury unwelcome aspects of yourself and construct a facade instead. How does the brain respond to chronic disconnection like this? It desperately seeks relief. Some pursue it through substances, others through relationships or screens. But the specific outlet isn't what matters. It is the feeling they're attempting to recreate. A flash of significance, a momentary sense of adequacy, however brief. Now we're caught. Not in addiction itself, but in a cycle. Internal emptiness triggers dopamine collapse. Escape behaviors follow, then shame arrives, creating more emptiness. Carl Jung recognized that breaking this cycle isn't about exerting willpower. It is about integration. He wrote that we don't achieve enlightenment by imagining light, but by bringing darkness into consciousness. This means turning toward your pain, not avoiding it. It means asking what suffering this addiction attempts to numb, and which part of yourself you've abandoned to cope. This is where Jung's methodology radically diverges from traditional models. He didn't merely want sobriety, he wanted wholeness. And wholeness begins with awareness, with recognizing patterns not as personal failures, but as clues, signals from your unconscious guiding you back to yourself. This explains why Jung considered dreams sacred, why symbols and archetypes held significance. They were communications from forgotten parts of ourselves. The inner child, the rebel, the healer, the wounded aspect, all still alive within you. Until we create space for them, we'll continue seeking wholeness through things never designed to complete us. But there is encouraging news. The moment you stop viewing addiction as personal failure and start recognizing it as communication, healing begins. Addiction isn't your identity. It is a protective mechanism your psyche developed to shield you from unprocessed pain. But now you're prepared, you're curious, and that changes everything. Let's examine 3 approaches: practical, spiritual, and soul, nurturing, that facilitate connection with your deeper self and reveal what truly drives compulsive patterns. These aren't about battling addiction, they're about listening to its message. First approach, shadow work. Carl Jung's most transformative concept was the shadow, that hidden dimension of our psyche containing everything we've rejected, denied, or judged about ourselves. The anger, sadness, jealousy, fear, even desires for power, love, or recognition. These aspects don't vanish. They submerge, then leak through our addictions, projections, and behavioral patterns. Shadow work involves making unconscious material conscious. It is sitting with yourself and asking what parts you've imprisoned, because you deemed them unacceptable. What truth are you avoiding that desperately needs acknowledgement? Begin shadow work through journaling. Try asking, if my addiction could speak, what would it tell me? Write without judgment. Allow it expression. You may discover surprising truth waiting just below the surface. Second approach, breath work. While Jung never taught breath work specifically, if he were alive today, he might recognize it as one of the most direct pathways to accessing the unconscious through physical experience. Breathwork involves using conscious, rhythmic breathing to bypass analytical thinking and access stored emotional energy. Our breath uniquely functions both automatically and voluntarily, serving as a portal to the unconscious. When you breathe consciously, Particularly in connected or circular patterns, you signal your nervous system that safety exists, that release is possible. What frequently follows is discharge of buried emotions, unresolved trauma, or long-forgotten memories. Some experience tears, others laughter, some physical shaking, some unprecedented clarity. This transcends emotional release. It is psychological integration. You're clearing energetic blockages that addiction attempted to suppress. Addiction numbs, breathwork reveals. Even a single session can illuminate that what you craved wasn't a substance. It was reconnection with yourself. Third approach, symbolic ritual as soul dialogue. Carl Jung frequently stated that the soul communicates through imagery. This explains why symbols, dreams, and rituals carry such potency. They bypass intellect and speak directly to the unconscious. When trapped in addiction, it is not just habits that become misaligned. Often our inner world has been silenced or dismissed. Ritual becomes a method for reopening that conversation. We're not discussing empty ceremony, but conscious acts of connection. Here is a powerful symbolic ritual to try. Find quiet space and light a candle. Fire represents timeless purification symbolism. Sit before a mirror and meet your own gaze, not to judge or criticize, but to witness. Speak aloud. I recognize I've been escaping something. I don't completely understand it yet, but I'm present now, ready to listen. Write a letter to your addicted aspect, not to shame it, but to understand it. Fold it and place it beneath the candle. Let it burn for 15 minutes while you breathe and remain present. This emphasizes reconnection over fixing. You're communicating to your deeper self that isolation has ended. Now that we've examined symptoms, encountered the shadow, and initiated reconnection work, it is time for genuine transformation. Because healing addiction transcends breaking habits. It is about becoming someone new, or more accurately, someone truer. It is about answering the call that addiction tried silencing all along. This is the path Jung called individuation, the journey toward wholeness, not perfection or polish, but integration. Most people assume healing means returning to who they were before addiction, but Jung would tell you that version was already fragmented, already disconnected, already suffering. The goal isn't returning, it is moving through and becoming the version addiction was pointing you toward. The version who feels whole without needing escape. Let's discuss what this actually looks like practically. First step, create a life nourishing your soul, not just filling your schedule. Jung believed most psychological suffering stemmed from unlived lives. This includes draining jobs, numbing relationships, routines, leaving your spirit unexpressed. You don't heal in isolation, you heal in environments reflecting your truth. Ask yourself what in your life feeds addiction and what feeds authenticity. Start small, one daily choice, one honest conversation, one creative outlet, one honored boundary. These aren't merely disciplined acts, they're acts of soul. Second step, let meaning replace stimulation. Addiction flourishes in overstimulated yet underconnected lives. We scroll instead of conversing, binge instead of reflecting, consume instead of creating. Rather than asking how to stop the habit, ask what this craving seeks emotionally and spiritually. Replace dopamine loops with meaning loops. Activities like creating art without judgment, sitting with silence and exploring feelings, reading material that stirs rather than merely entertains, spending time with people who hold space beyond superficial conversation. When your life becomes welcoming to your authentic self, addiction loses its hold. Third step, view relapse as messenger, not failure. Jung was clear that healing isn't linear. The unconscious doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals, circles, repeats patterns until truly integrated. Relapse, if it occurs, isn't shameful. It is information. It is your psyche saying you missed something. Let's look again. You're not back at the beginning. You're on a deeper spiral layer. And this time you have tools, awareness, language, community, compassion. The real miracle occurs when addiction becomes the reason you found yourself, when what once broke you becomes the doorway to liberation, because that is individuation, not self-improvement, not recovery. It is reclamation. The return of all lost parts, the shadow, the child, the artist, the dreamer, the spiritual seeker, woven into one radiant, coherent existence. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. This marks the beginning of your return. If this journey has resonated with you, even quietly comment below, "I'm coming home." And if you haven't already, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom for content that moves beyond surface level straight into soul. You are not broken. You are becoming. Your authentic self is waiting.